All right, so we'll make this short and sweet for everybody. So my name is Brian Whitmer. Just as far as introductions go, I'm a computer programmer by trade. My background is in usability, human-computer interaction, so the science of how people and technology meet. And out of school, I started a company called Instructure, which you may have heard of. We built Canvas, which is a learning platform that's used around the world for tracking grades and training and homework and educational resources. As that started to get big, I started looking at what to do next. And my oldest daughter, who is now 13, she has a disability called Rett syndrome, which prevents her from being able to talk or use her hands. And so we always kind of knew that technology was going to be an important part of helping her get outside of those restraints. And as I started looking at the apps and tools that people had built to help support people like my daughter, I felt like there was room for improvement. So we built something called CoughDrop, which is a communication app, a cloud-based communication app that people can use to be able to communicate when they can't get their words out. It's gone really well. It was a lot of fun. Learned a lot along the way. So that's a little bit of background about me. I'll let Scott introduce himself real quick as well, and we'll continue.
Yeah. Thanks. And I'm Scott Walquist. I actually graduated up at Weber State in their technical sales program, and have been in the cloud and tech industry for the past 15 years. Basically, I have worked for companies where I introduce new products into the Utah and local markets. For the past 5 years, I've been with CoughDrop. My son, he is nonverbal autistic and uses it to speak as well. I think Brian's going to show you this in a minute, but there's other projects out there, but they all seem to be extremely expensive, and we wanted one that was more in the cloud that could be used across all devices. So that's why I moved to CoughDrop.
So CoughDrop's been around for, like Scott said, about 5 years. The big difference is we embrace the cloud and sort of modern technologies. You can use it with touch or a high gaze or head tracking. There's a bunch of reporting that's built in, and it's open source. So anybody could technically use it. The code is out there, so it helps us make sure that it's secure and flexible. So this category of communication is called AAC, Augmentative and Alternative Communication. Same thing that Stephen Hawking uses. Traditionally, like Scott said, it's been very expensive, 15, 20 grand for a device because insurance would pay for it. And it was, this medical piece of hardware. So when the iPad showed up, that really shook things up a lot. There are iPad apps out there now that people could just buy a tablet and put an app on, and that's helped move things forward a little bit. We kind of kept going from there. CoughDrop's been going well. There's a lot of products around it that we've had to sort of build up to support, training materials and additional activities and resources just to establish that the CoughDrop product could stand as a viable alternative, which shouldn't be news to anybody in a cloud-based sort of SaaS play. But then COVID-19 hit and things sort of changed in a big way. Education funding, it's not like it froze, but it kind of went on pause. People were buying the things that they'd already bought and not necessarily looking as much at new things. A lot because they didn't have students in the classroom. Big surge in telepractice, which actually benefited CoughDrop a lot because we have some of these remote tools that are built in, the social distancing crisis, and then situations in the ICU. So a friend of mine in the space reached out to me and said, hey, I just saw this New York Times article about people in the hospital. They're on a breathing tube. They can't communicate. They can't really be able to drive their own recovery. And the hospitals are kicking out their loved ones or limiting access because, we need to protect everybody so we're not spreading germs unnecessarily. And my heart went out to them because my daughter's been in the ICU before on a breathing tube, and the recovery is hard. And having to go through that alone just sounded really rough. So the two of us talked to me, said, what can we do? How can we sort of use technology to help solve this problem? And we weren't coming at it as like, oh, let's find a business, let's build up a new product offering. It was, we have this immediate need, we have a crisis, and technology can help. So how can we leverage technology for this? what was happening a lot in hospitals is you would have nurses that were getting an iPad, or actually a lot of times just a phone, and they'd put it on like a selfie stick, so they'd hold it out so the person could do a video call with their family on their little tiny phone, and at least they could have some connection to people, even though they were cut off from everybody else. We said, well, we can do better than that. Speech therapists will use, when they're communicating with somebody or trying to teach somebody to communicate, they'll have these clear plastic boards called an E-Tran board. You hold it up and you kind of you peep your little head through the middle, and then you watch the person's eyes and you see which direction their eyes are looking, and they can make choices that way. So you can have up to 8 choices typically, but you can have fewer than that too. And we said, well, what if we merge those two? We have a video call so we can do it remotely, but we put this sort of choice board around the outside edges. So that's what we implemented. It's called CoVidSpeak. And it's just a video platform that has this additional functionality that you can have different layouts, these dynamic layouts for different modes of communication or different choices you want somebody to be able to make. And you can do it remotely. So you don't have to be in the same room with them like you had to with the plastic boards. People can be able to connect with their family and not just watch. So that was a big thing, was, when we talk about recovery and improvement, a lot of it's cognitive, and that cognitive need of being able to make decisions and interact with people and not be a passive observer actually provides a lot of value in someone's recovery. And so we saw that this could help with that and help somebody be able to make choices and be able to interact instead of just watching people from afar. So we implemented it, and as we started to build it and get it out there in some pilots at hospitals and things, which was great, we got great feedback. We also started to hear, this would be really useful for my students in the K-12 space who are stuck at home. I can't teach them. We do a Zoom call and they don't care because they can't engage with it. And we heard from nursing homes and care facilities saying we have people that are stuck still, months later in isolation, because these are vulnerable groups and they can't connect with their loved ones. And so we started to sort of say, well, this could be a more general thing, that there's different use cases that we could address. Lots of features that we've built in, a large backlog that's already there as well. The big question for us at this point is the best way to proceed. We could do a broad release. We're just saying, hey, we're going to just put it out there for everybody. We could do a targeted release and really try to focus on one specific niche, like the hospital ICU category or the education and therapy category or care homes. None of them are so specialized that it would cause the product to have to be, weird for anybody else, but they all have enough effort involved that if we were going to do a targeted focus, we would have to sort of pick one and do a real strong focus on it. Then the other question is just around the sales process. We've with CoughDrop, we've done direct sales to school districts and funding organizations, and we also have a self-serve model. People can just sign up for it on their own. That's like 70-30 with businesses versus consumers. And so we could go after those tracks. We could also look at donations or grants. This is a project that I think matches really well with the idea of grant funding. It's just that we've never done it before. And so, that would be new for us and something we have to kind of figure out. We're sort of taking some baby steps down that path, but those are the pieces that we're kind of trying to figure out right now. That's why we thought it would be useful to get in front of y'all and see if there are thoughts. If you have people that you think it would be useful for us to connect with, or if you have suggestions on this sort of ongoing strategy.
Thank you so very much for that presentation. I got one quick clarifying question for you.
Yep.
So you have currently, there are people who are currently using this in the hospitals and such, or it's still in development? And if it is being used, what are some of the feedback that you've gotten from the users?
Yeah, so we've had people in a hospital setting and in a class educational setting that have used it. I wouldn't, it's been early pilots, but the feedback's been very positive. They've said this is better than the alternatives, because there is no product that's like this in the space right now. The alternatives would be a Zoom video call or, an in-person sort of choice board. And so this is serving a need that has definitely been felt, but there wasn't anything else for it. So the feedback's really positive. There's a lot of promise and a lot of potential. Concerns around privacy, and I feel like we have a really good beat on how to address those and the security side. So I'm not super worried about that, but yeah.
I've got a question. Brian and Scott, great presentation. I love the why behind you started this and how you are wanting better communication with your own children. This is wonderful. I like also that you're focused on how to proceed in the most laser focused way. I would ask you how many questions you've asked each of these categories, each of these groups, how many validating points, data points can you put to each of these categories on how to start, where to put your focus. And I think you'll quickly see where maybe the greatest need would be or the greatest interest would be.
Okay, that's helpful. So just kind of dive in specifically to what we've heard, what we've learned, what questions we still need to answer, and kind of see what bubbles to the top.
Also, how big is your team?
There are 3 of us.
And how does that limit you or not limit you in once you've identified which route to go to? How does that limit? Could you facilitate moving forward in either one of these categories with the 3 of you, or do you need additional help?
The goal is
I think go ahead.
Where we need help. Like it's resources and things like that. There's still some things that we could put in there. Currently, the person on the other end is having to activate the button so that the voice goes and things like that. Whereas we can continue to put in some more resources and time if we had a bigger team, obviously. Most of that is Brian. But we're at a place where we know how it's done and who could use it and what words are used the most and things like that. But we're not at we don't have the force ourselves to be able to do so. It'll be a good problem to have.
Yeah, I think one of our biggest constraints right now is just, if we decide, whatever we decide as far as who we're going to market to and sell to, it would obviously be great to have more people selling and more people getting the word out. So that's probably our biggest limiting factor. Is just the outreach and the outbound communication. So, yeah, Scott will just have to work 24 hours a day.
Put in that extra couple hours.
I've got a question coming from online. Why is the technology normally so expensive, and how does using the cloud help with that?
So it's not the cloud specifically that helps. The technology is expensive because insurance will pay for something expensive, quite frankly. And if you've been in the medical space, then you've probably heard this argument multiple times. There is something to be said for when insurance pays for it, then you have to give dedicated support for 5 years and be able to replace the hardware at a moment's notice, et cetera, et cetera. But even with all of that, there's just an enormous premium. And so part of it is because insurance will pay. Part of it is because the volume is just so low. And so when you have low volume, you do a high price to compensate for it in order to get your business sustainable. So we've come at it and said, this cloud piece, bring your own device. We've come at it to say, there is a huge untapped market of people that could use this software but haven't been able to afford it traditionally, and that's who we're going after, is people who just it wasn't an option before, which will increase the volume, which lets us push the price down as a result, at least in theory.
Yeah, we're trying to change the thinking of the market. In the past, it's been they get one device. If the device breaks or dies, they're out of luck. Whereas we're trying to make it more like Google Docs or Office 365, where it doesn't matter what device they have, they can access that communication, right? So it's making it more available in school districts and things that couldn't afford it. They've got a large group of kids with autism and cerebral palsy and things like that. But it's also making it more for stroke victims and ALS clients and things who may need it temporarily. The cloud piece can do that, in that they're not having to go out and purchase this expensive piece of equipment, because they can just put it on whatever they have, and it all goes with them. If the device breaks or dies, they just grab something new.
Where do you guys hope to see yourself in the next few years with CoughDrop?
Part of what we've had to work so hard at with CoughDrop is just establishing credibility. This is a space where some of the products have been around for 10, 15, 20 years. And there have been lots of startups who showed up and fizzled out. And with something as, we're not talking about a video game or, an email client. We're talking about something that's integral to somebody's interactions with the world. And so there's a very, very strong resistance to change. And so we spent a lot of work just establishing the fact that we can be a player in the space and that we're not going anywhere. So that took years. And what I think going forward, now that we sort of established and checked that box, the next step has been to be able to say, no, we're actually thought leaders in this space. We tried to do that early on, and because of the reluctance, it was hard for people to buy into that idea. But we've pushed a lot of boundaries, and there's things that we can do to sort of keep raising the bar. And that's what we want to be able to show people, is that this is a different sort of company, because we're going to push the limits and really drive forward instead of just hanging out where everybody's at.
I got a question around grants for you. You have anyone on your team who's ever written any grants?
No.
And we found out quickly that I would be horrible at it, so we've been working. Grant writers and things that may be able to do it for us.
There's a little bit of a shift. You may not have to think in terms of grants. I've seen a lot of companies right now getting no bid type of contracts from municipalities, from states under the emergency needs with COVID. So you may have a great opportunity to secure contracts faster. We're seeing decisions made in 10 days instead of 6 months. So that still is a great opportunity, especially when you think about those with the disabilities. So I'm not thinking ICU, but maybe I was thinking the disabilities, because there's a big panic going on of what do we do? We're being set backwards in our progress with these individuals that we put so much money and time into. So I think it's still a great opportunity if you were to connect in with the municipalities directly.
Yeah, and we've actually heard that before, that there's some CARES funding and things like that. We just don't know exactly where this CARES funding is, and that there's some technology grants for disability community and things that has to do with COVID, being able to speak remotely and things. So that's what I've been trying to do, is find these things. Everybody keeps saying, yeah, you should go after that. I'm like, I'd love to. I don't know where it is. So are you recommending just reach out to each municipality and say, what do you have available?
But it's not doing anything for me. Hey, Brian, do you have any state services that help you and your wife with your daughter?
Did you say day services?
State or?
No. So there are state services. There's DSPD, for example, which a lot of people, there's huge waiting lists for it. And we made the conscious decision to, when we saw how large the waiting list was, we made the conscious decision to say, let's let other people get a little more ahead of us in line, as it were, because we have the resources to be able to help fund. Now, I've heard since then that there's been some questions about ongoing funding because not enough people have applied. And so we ended up applying, and we're on the wait list for that, just to sort of make sure that they know that there's demand for it. But that's kind of where we're at.
Anyway, those would be the individuals who would know who oversees funding. So
that's true. That's a good point. We could talk to DSPD and see.
Yeah, and we've got a caseworker with Adam, not on the technology side, just on the insurance side, but that's not a bad idea. I can reach out to her.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You talked a little bit about business to business type of sales, and with your goal of making this product a cheaper product, which means that you have to sell more of them. What is your strategy to do that, and is it sustainable with a sales team where, if you're only getting, and I don't know what the difference in price is versus paying the $15,000 versus I don't know what your model is. Could you even sustain a sales team, if it's $70? I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, and that's really good for us to think through. There is the option for more of a premium tier that we would sell to like hospitals or organizations that could pay for it. I always, this is the trick, right? Because I feel really guilty charging lots of money to families with disabilities because there are so many expenses that they're already paying for out of pocket that nobody knows about and nobody, is doing the math to figure it out. And so adding something on top of that is always hard for me. And so we want to have some kind of option where people can have an approachable solution. And so we kind of end up with these 2-tier sort of models where it's like, oh, we have sort of a premium specialized offering that we can give for these large organizations. And if we do that, then I think we can justify a sales team for that level or that tier, I think. But those are the trade-offs that we're kind of trying to work through right now.
Well, one of the things, I think, two things you're missing is, number one, you should contact the SBDC for some help because it's free. The secondary is probably, I would look at your pricing structure as part of your marketing and have X percentage of each sale goes to help those who can't afford. It's worked for a number of companies, sock companies, shoe companies. It's just a smart thing you could do, integrate into what you're doing. It looks good for investors so they see that you're not just giving stuff away, you're having to pay for it to give away. There's some other alternatives to look at.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Have you guys contacted the SBDC?
I have not. So that's on my next to-do list. Basically, we've been just working directly through like hospitals and things like that to do a lot of the beta testing for us. So we haven't really gotten to that point yet as far as the full sales side of it. That was the where do we go next part.
Jim, doesn't the SBDC help with grant writing as well? Okay, definitely.
Wait, say that again. The
SBDC does help with grant writing.
Okay.
Well, then we will.
Well, Brian and Scott, thank you so much for this presentation and the just heart and motivation that you guys have in this. We have one final question that we like to ask all of our 1MC presenters, and that's, what can the 1MC community do for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, so we're both on LinkedIn, and if you know of anyone that we should be talking to, or if you have a connection to someone, a lot of our connections are actually back east just because of the nature of how CoughDrop sort of grew. So here locally in the Utah and the surrounding areas, we don't have as many contacts and resources. So if you heard what we're talking about, you're like, who really should hear about this is so-and-so. We would love an introduction, or if you have other thoughts for us, please feel free to connect with us, and we can continue the conversation for sure.
Great. Well, thank you.
We appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you all.
The sounding board.
We appreciate the echoes, your echoing mic, and the good communication. So thanks for all the thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. It's echoes of applause for you. That's
makes us feel really epic, right? Because we're just like, boom, we're in this large auditorium full of thousands of you all. So
that's right. That's right. Next time it'll be millions for you. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for all of our audience online and came here physically, and hope that you all have a great week and look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.